The emergency klaxon screamed through the cramped cockpit of the cargo shuttle Wanderer as Derek Voss fought desperately with the controls. Red warning lights bathed his sweat-soaked face in an ominous glow while the nav system displayed nothing but error codes where star charts should have been. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered through gritted teeth, yanking hard on the manual steering column. The planet below rushed up to meet him, a verdant green world that wasn't supposed to exist according to every map in the known galaxy. The shuttle screamed through the alien atmosphere, its heat shields glowing cherry red as Derek tried to find anywhere remotely flat to attempt a landing. Dense jungle canopy stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by winding rivers that gleamed like silver threads in the afternoon sunlight of this unnamed world. At the last possible moment, Derek spotted a small clearing and threw every bit of power into the reverse thrusters. The Wanderer hit the ground hard, bouncing twice before sliding sideways into a cluster of massive tree trunks. The impact threw Derek against his restraints, and everything went black. When consciousness returned, it came with a symphony of pain. Derek's left shoulder throbbed where it had slammed against the console, and something warm trickled down his forehead. The acrid smell of burned electronics filled the air, mixing with the humid, almost floral scent drifting through a massive crack in the cockpit's view screen. He struggled out of his pilot's seat, every movement sending fresh waves of agony through his battered body. The shuttle was a complete loss. Even if he could somehow repair the nav system, the engine core had cracked and was leaking coolant all over the deck plates. He was stranded on an uncharted world with maybe 3 days of emergency rations and a med kit that looked about as damaged as he felt. Derek activated his emergency beacon, though he held little hope. If this planet didn't appear on any charts, the chances of a rescue ship finding his signal were essentially zero. Still, he had to try. The beacon's weak pulse joined the chorus of alien sounds filtering through the jungle. Strange bird calls, rustling leaves, and something else he couldn't quite identify. For the first day, Derek remained near the wreckage, fashioning a crude shelter from pieces of the shuttle's hull and trying to make sense of his situation. The planet seemed remarkably Earth-like, with breathable atmosphere and gravity only slightly higher than standard. The local flora was exotic but apparently harmless, and he'd even managed to identify what looked like edible fruits growing on nearby trees. By the second day, his water supplies were running dangerously low, forcing him to venture deeper into the jungle in search of the river he'd spotted during his crash landing. That's when he realized he wasn't alone on this world. The feeling started as a prickle between his shoulder blades, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Derek paused in his trek through the dense undergrowth, slowly turning in a complete circle. Nothing moved among the towering trees except the occasional colorful bird or fluttering insect, but the feeling persisted. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding small and foreign in the alien wilderness. "Is someone there?" Silence answered him, broken only by the distant sound of running water. Derek pressed on toward the river, but now every shadow seemed to hide potential threats, every rustling leaf a possible pursuer. He never saw them coming. One moment, Derek was kneeling by the crystal-clear stream, refilling his water containers, and the next he was flat on his back with something sharp pressed against his throat. 3 figures loomed over him, and his breath caught in amazement rather than terror. They were unmistakably female, tall and graceful with distinctive blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer in the dappled sunlight. Their hair was long and dark, adorned with what looked like carved bone ornaments, and they wore clothing that appeared to be woven from plant fibers in intricate patterns. Most striking of all were their eyes, large, expressive, and colored like polished amber. The one holding what Derek now realized was a spear said something in a melodic language he'd never heard before. Her companions responded, their voices carrying musical tones that seemed almost too beautiful for simple conversation. Derek raised his hands slowly, the universal gesture of surrender. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm not armed. I don't mean any harm." The 3 alien women exchanged glances, clearly recognizing that he was trying to communicate even if they didn't understand his words. The spear wielder stepped back slightly, though she kept her weapon ready. She spoke again, this time directing her words at Derek with what sounded like a question. "I don't understand," Derek said, shaking his head. "I'm human, from far away." He gestured vaguely at the sky, hoping they might grasp his meaning. The reaction was immediate and startling. All three women's eyes widened, and they began speaking rapidly among themselves in their musical language. The spear wielder suddenly knelt beside Derek, her amber eyes studying his face with intense curiosity. She reached out hesitantly, as if to touch his skin, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, she stood and issued what sounded like commands to her companions. One of them produced a length of rope-like vine from her pack, but the spear wielder shook her head and said something that made the others put their restraints away. To Derek's surprise, the leader extended her hand to help him up. When he took it, her skin felt warm and surprisingly familiar despite its alien hue. She gestured toward the deeper jungle, speaking in what seemed like a reassuring tone. "I guess I'm going with you," Derek said, gathering his water containers. He had little choice in the matter, but something about these beings didn't feel threatening despite their obvious capability. They moved through the jungle with practiced ease, occasionally glancing back to ensure he was keeping up. As they traveled deeper into the alien wilderness, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn toward something extraordinary. These weren't just any aliens, they were a society organized and purposeful, and for reasons he couldn't begin to fathom, they seemed more interested in preserving him than harming him. The jungle began to change around them, showing subtle signs of cultivation and care. They were approaching something important, Derek realized. A settlement, perhaps, or something even more significant. Whatever awaited him in the depths of this alien world, Derek Voss was about to discover that sometimes being lost was just another way of being found. Derek's first glimpse of the alien settlement took his breath away. Hidden beneath an enormous canopy of interwoven branches and bioluminescent vines, the village seemed to grow organically from the jungle itself. Crystalline formations jutted from tree trunks, casting a soft blue-green glow over dwellings that appeared carved from living wood. Graceful bridges of woven fiber connected different levels of the multi-layered community, and everywhere he looked, more of the blue-skinned women moved with fluid purpose. The sight that truly amazed him, however, was the complete absence of any males. His escorts led him through winding pathways where curious faces peered from doorways and windows. Whispered conversations followed in their wake, the musical language rising and falling like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Children, unmistakably female despite their youth, stared at him with wide amber eyes before being ushered away by protective mothers. At the village's heart stood the largest structure Derek had yet seen, its walls formed from what looked like a single massive crystal formation that pulsed with internal light. His escorts paused at its entrance, speaking in hushed, reverent tones before gesturing for him to follow them inside. The interior was breathtaking. The crystal walls refracted light into dancing patterns that shifted and flowed like living art. At the chamber's center sat a woman who could only be their leader, older than the others with intricate tattoos covering her arms and silver threading through her dark hair. Her amber eyes held depths of wisdom and sorrow that spoke of countless difficult decisions. She rose gracefully as Derek approached, studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed despite being fully clothed. When she spoke, her voice carried authority that needed no translation, though Derek caught what sounded like a question at the end of her statement. "I'm sorry," Derek said, spreading his hands helplessly. "I don't understand your language. My name is Derek. Derek Voss." He pointed to himself as he spoke his name. The leader's eyes widened slightly. She repeated his name with careful pronunciation, then pressed her hand to her chest and said something that sounded like, "Vaylin." Derek nodded and repeated her name, earning what might have been a smile. Vaylin turned to speak with his escorts, their conversation growing animated. Derek caught his name mentioned several times, along with gestures toward the sky that suggested they understood he wasn't from their world. Finally, Vaylin approached him and placed her hand on his chest, just over his heart. Her touch was warm and somehow comforting, and she spoke a single word that sounded almost like a prayer. Before Derek could respond, another woman entered the chamber. She was younger than Valen, but moved with similar authority, carrying what looked like a medical scanner carved from the same crystal material as the walls. Her examination of Derek was thorough and slightly uncomfortable, involving devices that hummed with energy as they passed over his body. The scanner woman spoke, rapidly to Valen, her excitement evident despite the language barrier. Valen's response was measured, but Derek caught undertones of hope and something that might have been relief. "What's going on?" Derek asked, though he expected no answer. "What are you looking for?" As if summoned by his confusion, a third woman appeared, younger still, with the lean build of a scholar rather than a warrior or healer. Unlike the others, she approached Derek with obvious curiosity rather than clinical detachment. She carried a collection of what looked like translation devices, crystal tablets that glowed softly when activated. The young woman, who Derek would later learn was named Kaylin, worked with patient determination to establish basic communication. Through a combination of gestures, simple drawings in the crystal tablet's light surfaces, and careful repetition, a primitive vocabulary began to emerge. "Derek," she said carefully, pointing to him, then touched her chest. "Kaylin, Kaylin," Derek repeated, and was rewarded with a brilliant smile that transformed her entire face. Over the next hour, through painstaking effort, Kaylin managed to convey the basics of their situation. Her people were called the Veix. This was their hidden city of Ethros. Derek struggled with the concept she was trying to communicate until she showed him images in the crystal tablets. The pictures told a story of tragedy. Once the Veix had been like humans, male and female living together, raising families, building their civilization among the jungle trees. Then came the withering, a plague that had swept through their world generations ago, targeting the male population with devastating efficiency. Within a single generation, every Veix male had died. Derek's blood ran cold as he began to understand the implications. The remaining women had turned to artificial reproduction, cloning themselves, to preserve their species. For a time it had worked, but genetic diversity was essential for long-term survival, and after centuries of cloning, their population was beginning to show signs of serious degradation. Birth defects were becoming common, lifespans were shortening, and their numbers were steadily declining. Kaylin's next series of images made Derek's heart race. She showed him genetic charts, DNA helixes, and what could only be compatibility readings. Then she pointed to him and spoke a phrase that needed no translation, her amber eyes bright with something between hope and desperation. "You are exactly what we need." The words hit Derek like a physical blow. He understood now why they had treated him with such care, why Valen had looked at him like he was some kind of miracle. They didn't just want his help, they needed his genetic material to save their entire species from extinction. I need to think about this," Derek managed, though he doubted Kaylin understood his words. The implications were staggering. These weren't just aliens who had found him interesting. They were a dying people who saw him as their salvation. Kaylin seemed to sense his confusion and distress. She spoke gently, her tone reassuring, then gestured toward one of the chambers, alcoves where a bed had been prepared. Food and fresh clothing waited nearby, along with more of the crystal devices that seemed to serve multiple functions in their society. As Derek was led to his quarters, his mind reeled with questions. How many Veix were there? What exactly were they asking of him? And perhaps most importantly, did he have any real choice in the matter? Or was he essentially a prisoner, albeit a very well-treated one? The sleeping chamber was beautiful, but alien, its walls pulsing gently with bioluminescent patterns that seemed designed to promote rest. Derek lay on the surprisingly comfortable bed, staring up at the living ceiling, and tried to process everything he'd learned. He was alone on an alien world with a species that needed him to survive. The weight of an entire civilization's future had just been placed on his shoulders, and he had no idea how to carry it. Outside his chamber, he could hear the musical voices of the Veix continuing their discussions late into the night. "Derek," suspected he was the primary topic of conversation, and the thought made sleep seem impossible despite his exhaustion. Tomorrow, he would have to face the reality of his situation. Tonight he could only lie in the alien darkness and wonder what kind of future awaited him in this hidden city among the stars. The soft glow of the crystal walls pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, as if the very city itself was welcoming him. Home. Derek closed his eyes and tried not to think about what that might mean. Derek's third day in Ethros began with what he could only describe as the most awkward medical examination of his life. The healer, a stern-faced woman named Thyra, had insisted on a complete biological assessment, with Kaelin translating through increasingly complex crystal interfaces that had somehow learned to interpret basic human speech patterns overnight. She says the scanning is necessary for understanding, Kaelin explained, her cheeks taking on a deeper blue tint that Derek was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of blushing. Your biological systems are different from ours. Different. How? Derek asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. Thyra's examination was thorough to the point of embarrassment. She studied his bone density, muscle composition, cardiovascular system, and various other aspects of human physiology, with scientific fascination that did nothing to make Derek feel less like a specimen under a microscope. The worst part was her obvious confusion about human modesty. She couldn't understand why he insisted on keeping certain articles of clothing on during the examination. Your people are shy about body? Kaelin asked, genuinely puzzled. This is strange concept. Bodies are for life, for health, for... She paused, searching for words the translation system could provide. For sharing life essence. Derek felt his own face reddening. We're just private about certain things. It's cultural. The concept of privacy seemed to fascinate Kaelin almost as much as his physiology fascinated Thyra. As the days passed, she spent increasing amounts of time with Derek, teaching him basic Veix while learning about human customs and behavior. Their communication improved rapidly as the crystal translation devices adapted to Derek's speech patterns and began providing more nuanced interpretations. Your world has males and females together? Kaelin asked one afternoon as they sat, in what Derek had come to think of as the village's central garden. Bioluminescent flowers bloomed around them in response to their voices, creating a constantly shifting light show. Yes, roughly half and half, Derek explained. We live together, work together, raise families together. It's been that way for as long as we can remember. Kaelin's amber eyes grew distant. Must be wonderful to have such balance. We have only stories now, from the time before the withering. She gestured toward a crystalline monument at the garden's center, its surface carved with what Derek now recognized as memorial inscriptions. My grandmother's grandmother remembered the last males. She said they were different from us, not just in body but in thinking, in feeling. How so? Derek found himself genuinely curious about Veix society before their catastrophe. Males were builders, explorers. They reached always toward new things, new places. Kaelin smiled, sadly. Females were nurturers, preservers. We kept the knowledge, raised the young, maintained the harmony. Together we were complete. Derek looked around the village with new understanding. Everything he saw was indeed about preservation and maintenance. The living architecture, the careful cultivation of the jungle, the crystal technology that seemed designed to last for millennia rather than become obsolete. The Veix had created a beautiful, stable society, but it lacked the dynamic energy that came from diverse perspectives and approaches to problem-solving. What about exploration? Now? Derek asked. Do your people still travel, discover new things? Kaelin's expression grew troubled. Some do, the hunters, the scouts, but it is dangerous now. Our numbers are small and we cannot risk losing anyone unnecessarily. We have become careful, perhaps too careful. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another, Veix woman, this one wearing the elaborate jewelry that marked her as a member of the village council. She spoke rapidly to Kaelin. her tone suggesting urgency, and Derek caught his name mentioned several times. "What's wrong?" Derek asked as the woman hurried away. "There is debate," Kalen admitted reluctantly. "Some of the council believe we must act quickly before you decide to leave. They think waiting shows disrespect to the ancestors who died hoping for this moment." Derek felt a chill that had nothing to do with the jungle's evening temperature. "Act quickly how?" Kalen's blush deepened. "They suggest formal bonding ceremony, with multiple partners to ensure genetic diversity as quickly as possible." "Multiple partners?" Derek's voice cracked slightly. "It would be honor," Kalen said quickly. "The chosen women would be volunteers, selected for genetic compatibility and willingness to bear children for the future of our people." Derek stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the garden where the jungle's wild growth began. The weight of expectation he'd felt since his arrival suddenly felt crushing. "Kalen, I understand your people's situation. I really do. But what you're talking about, it's not how humans form relationships. We don't just breed like livestock to solve genetic problems." "I did not mean to offend," Kalen said softly, joining him at the garden's edge. "Our situation is desperate. Perhaps it makes us think of solutions that seem wrong to you." Derek turned to face her, struck by the genuine distress in her expression. "It's not wrong, it's just impersonal. Where I come from, relationships are about choice, about emotional connection, about love." "Love?" Kalen repeated the word slowly, her translation crystal pulsing as it processed the concept. "This is deep emotional bonding between individuals?" "Among other things, yes." Kalen was quiet for a long moment, studying Derek's face. In the soft glow of the garden's bioluminescent plants. "Is it possible," she asked carefully, "to feel such bonding with someone very different from yourself?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Derek wasn't sure either of them was ready to explore. But as he looked into Kalen's amber eyes, he realized that something had indeed been growing between them over these past days of constant interaction. What had started as teacher and student, translator and subject, had evolved into something more complex and infinitely more personal. "Yes," Derek said quietly. "I think it is." Kalen's smile was radiant, transforming her entire face and causing the nearest flowers to bloom in response to her emotional state. "Then perhaps there is hope for finding solutions that honor both your customs and our needs." As if summoned by their words, Valen appeared at the garden's entrance. The matriarch's expression was grave as she approached them, and Derek could see the weight of leadership in every line of her posture. "Derek Voss," she said, her pronunciation of his name much improved. "The council wishes to speak with you tomorrow. There are decisions that must be made." Derek nodded, his stomach tightening with apprehension. "I understand." Valen studied both of them for a moment, and Derek had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing more than either of them intended to reveal. "Kalen will continue to serve as translator," she said finally. "Her insights into your customs may prove valuable to the discussions." After Valen departed, Derek and Kalen remained in the garden as the jungle's nocturnal symphony began around them. The bioluminescent flowers gradually dimmed to their nighttime glow, creating an intimate atmosphere that made conversation seem both easier and more dangerous. "Derek," Kalen said softly, "whatever the council decides, I want you to know that your feelings, your customs matter to me. We may be desperate, but we are not without honor." Derek reached out, hesitating only briefly before taking her hand. Her skin was warm and soft, and he was struck again by how human she felt despite her alien appearance. "Thank you, Kalen. That means more to me than you know." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined as the alien night settled around them. Derek knew that tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and even more difficult decisions. But for this moment, in this beautiful garden on an impossible world, he wasn't a genetic solution to a species' survival crisis. He was Simply a man holding hands with a woman who was beginning to mean everything to him. The council meeting took place in the crystal chamber where Derek had first met Veix, but this time the space was filled with nearly 24 Veix women representing different aspects of their society. Healers, scholars, hunters, and craftswomen, all gathered to discuss the future of their people and Derek's role in it. Kalen translated as each council member spoke, but Derek could sense the underlying tensions even without understanding every word. Some voices carried urgency bordering on desperation, while others counseled patience and respect for his autonomy. The debate grew heated at times, with amber eyes flashing and musical voices rising in harmonies that somehow managed to sound both beautiful and contentious. Thyra believes we must establish a formal breeding program immediately, Kalen translated, her cheeks flushing deeper blue. She has identified 12 women of optimal genetic compatibility who are willing to participate. Derek felt his stomach clench. And what do you think about this? Kalen was quiet for a long moment before responding. I think Thyra sees only the biological solution and forgets that you are a person, not just genetic material. She paused, glancing around the chamber where the debate continued. But I also understand her fears. Each season that passes, we lose more children to genetic defects. Time is not our ally. A younger council member, barely past adolescence by Derek's estimation, spoke up with obvious passion. Kalen's translation came haltingly. Senna says that perhaps the answer is not just biological. She suggests that if you were to stay, to become truly part of our society, your influence might help us regain some of the dynamic energy we lost with our males. This sparked another round of intense discussion. Derek watched the interplay of personalities and positions, beginning to understand the complex politics of a society facing extinction. These weren't just different opinions about reproduction. They were fundamentally different philosophies about survival and identity. They're afraid, Derek realized aloud. Yes, Kalen confirmed softly. We have been afraid for so long that we have forgotten how to hope for anything beyond mere survival. Veix finally called for quiet, her authority bringing immediate silence to the chamber. She spoke directly to Derek, her words carrying the weight of both leadership and personal pain. She says, Kalen translated, that the decision must ultimately be yours. We cannot force what we need. It must be given freely, or it has no value. But she asks that you consider not just our biological needs, but our deeper need for renewal, for the return of balance to our society. Derek stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the chamber. Tell them that I need time to think. This isn't a decision I can make lightly, and it's not one I should make alone. His words caused another stir, which Kalen quickly explained. They are confused by the idea of not making the decision alone. In our society, important choices are always made by individuals after consultation, but the final responsibility rests with one person. Where I come from, decisions that affect two people are made by two people, Derek said, looking directly at Kalen. Together. The implications of his words weren't lost on anyone in the chamber. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices a mixture of surprise, speculation, and in some cases, approval. Veix raised her hand for silence, then spoke a single question that needed no translation. Derek could see the hope and concern warring in her amber eyes. She asks, Kalen whispered, if you are choosing me specifically or if you are simply rejecting their proposal. Derek felt his heartbeat accelerate. The moment had come sooner than he'd expected, but perhaps that was for the best. Tell her that I'm choosing you, Kalen, if she'll have me. The crystal chamber erupted in excited conversation as Kalen's eyes widened in shock and joy. She spoke rapidly to the council, her voice carrying notes Derek had never heard before. Pure happiness, mixed with something deeper and more complex. Veix stood, her expression thoughtful. She asked another question, which Kalen translated with obvious embarrassment. She wants to know if our bonding would include the possibility of children. Eventually, yes, Derek said, still looking at Kalen. If that's what we both want, when we're ready. The response seemed to satisfy the council's immediate concerns, though Derek could see that many questions remained unanswered. The formal meeting dissolved into smaller conversations as various council members approached to offer congratulations or express their thoughts about this unexpected development. Later that evening, Derek and Kaylin walked together through the village's upper levels, where platforms among the highest branches offered stunning views of the jungle canopy under starlight. They'd spoken little since leaving the council chamber, both overwhelmed by how quickly their relationship had become a matter of public record and political significance. "Are you sure about this?" Kaylin asked finally, settling beside Derek, on a secluded platform where privacy screens of woven leaves blocked them from casual observation. "Your choice affects not just us, but the entire future of my people." Derek took her hands in his, marveling again at how perfectly they fit together despite their different origins. "I'm sure about you," he said quietly. "The rest, we'll figure out together." Kaylin's smile was radiant in the starlight. "Together," she repeated, as if testing the concept. "I like this word." What followed was their first real kiss, tentative at first, then deeper as they discovered that despite their physiological differences, human and Veix expressions of affection were remarkably compatible. Kaylin's skin was slightly cooler than human normal, but her lips were soft and warm, and when she pressed closer to him, Derek felt a rightness that transcended species boundaries. "Is this love?" Kaylin asked softly, her breath warm against his neck. "It's the beginning of it," Derek murmured, running his fingers through her dark hair. "Love takes time to grow, but I think we have something that could become love given the chance." They spent hours on that platform, talking and touching and learning each other's bodies with the careful attention of explorers mapping new territory. Kaylin's skin was incredibly sensitive, responding to even the lightest touch with subtle changes in color and temperature. Derek discovered that the bioluminescent patterns in her skin became more pronounced when she was aroused, creating a beautiful light show that seemed almost too intimate for anything but the darkness they shared. When she touched him in return, her fingers were curious and reverent, tracing the unfamiliar contours of human masculinity with wonder. "You are so different," she whispered, "but somehow right, as if you were made to complete what we were missing." Their lovemaking was slow and careful, each of them acutely aware that they were bridging not just physical differences but cultural ones. Derek was gentle with Kaylin's alien anatomy, learning her responses and preferences through whispered guidance and intuitive understanding. She was equally attentive to his needs, her scholarly nature extending to the intimate exploration of how to bring him pleasure. Afterward, they lay entwined under the alien stars, Kaylin's head on Derek's chest, while her skin gradually returned to its normal luminescence. "Tomorrow there will be more questions," Kaylin said softly. "About timelines, about procedures, about how we integrate human genetic material into our population planning." Derek tightened his arms around her. "Tomorrow we'll face them together, but tonight let's just be Derek and Kaylin, not the solution to anyone's problems." Kaylin lifted her head to look at him, her amber eyes serious. "Do you think it's possible? To be both? To be ourselves and also be what our peoples need us to be?" Derek considered the question, watching the play of bioluminescent patterns across her skin. "I think," he said finally, "that maybe what both our peoples need is for us to show them that love isn't a luxury they can't afford. It's the foundation everything else has to be built on." Kaylin smiled and settled back against his chest. "Then that's what we'll do," she said simply. "We'll show them love." As sleep finally claimed them under the alien stars, Derek felt a peace he hadn't known since his ship had crashed on this impossible world. Tomorrow would bring challenges and difficult decisions, but it would also bring the chance to build something new, not just a genetic solution to extinction, but a bridge between worlds, a foundation for a future neither human nor Veix, but something entirely new and wonderful. In his dreams, Derek saw children with amber eyes and his smile, a city in the jungle where two species learned to become one, and a love story that would be remembered across the stars. 3 months had passed since the night Derek and Kaylin first declared their love under the alien stars, and the changes in ethos were remarkable. The Crystal City hummed with new energy as construction projects expanded the settlement's living spaces and workshops. Most significantly, a new communication array was taking shape in the canopy above, its bioluminescent components designed to reach beyond the planet's atmosphere. Derek stood in the center of the array's construction site, working alongside Veix engineers to integrate human technology with their organic systems. His crashed shuttle had provided crucial components, but more importantly, his different perspective on problem-solving had inspired innovations neither species could
have achieved alone.
The harmonic frequency is still fluctuating, announced Rihanna, the chief engineer, her amber eyes studying the readouts on her crystal display. We need a more stable resonance pattern. Derek studied the problem from his own portable workstation, a Zyder hybrid device that married human electronics with Veix biotech. What if we use a dual-phase system, human digital processing for precision, Veix organic components for stability? The suggestion sparked animated discussion among the engineering team. This had become the pattern over recent months, Derek offering perspectives shaped by his different background, the Veix contributing their deep understanding of biointegration and harmonic technologies. Together, they were creating something neither species had imagined possible. It could work, Rihanna concluded after running simulations on her equipment. The organic matrix would provide the stability we need, while your digital systems could handle the rapid frequency adjustments. As the team began implementing the new design, Kaylin appeared at Derek's side. Her pregnancy was beginning to show, a subtle rounding of her previously slender form that filled Derek with wonder and protective tenderness. The child growing within her represented more than just the first human-Veix hybrid. It was the symbol of two species choosing cooperation over desperation. "How are you feeling?" Derek asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Strong," Kaylin replied, leaning into his embrace. "Dr. Thyra says the baby is developing perfectly. The genetic combination appears to be not just viable but optimal." Her smile carried notes of amazement that still appeared whenever they discussed their child's unprecedented biology. Their pregnancy had answered many of the Council's urgent questions about genetic compatibility, but it had also raised new ones about the future of human-Veix relations. Would their child be the first of many? How would two species integrate into a single society? And perhaps most importantly, what would happen when other humans inevitably arrived? "The communication array should be operational within days," Derek said, gesturing toward the construction above them. "Once we establish contact with human space, everything changes." Kaylin nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Are you ready for that? To no longer be the only human among us?" It was a question Derek had been pondering frequently. His unique position as the sole representative of his species had given him influence and importance that might diminish once other humans arrived. More troubling was the possibility that not all humans would approach the Veix situation with the same respect and partnership he'd tried to maintain. "I'm ready," Derek said finally. "But I want to make sure we're bringing the right humans here. People who will see the Veix as partners, not problems to be solved or resources to be exploited." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Violin, who approached with the measured pace that usually indicated important news. Her expression was serious but not troubled, the look of a leader bearing significant information rather than bad news. "Derek, Kaylin," she began, "the long-range scouts have returned with interesting reports. It seems your beacon signal has been detected." Derek felt his pulse quicken. Detected by whom? "A survey ship from what they call the Terran Colonial Authority," Valen replied. "They have been conducting long-range mapping in this sector and picked up your emergency transmission. They are requesting permission to investigate." The moment Derek had been simultaneously hoping for and dreading had arrived. Contact with human civilization was imminent, bringing with it all the opportunities and dangers he'd been preparing for. "What did you tell them?" Kaylin asked, her hand finding Derek's. "Nothing yet," Valen replied. "I wanted to consult with you both." First, this contact will be the first official communication between our species. How we handle it will set the tone for everything that follows. Derek exchanged glances with Kaylin, seeing his own mixture of excitement and apprehension reflected in her amber eyes. They had discussed this moment extensively, planning for various scenarios, but now that it was here, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. "I think," Derek said slowly, "that we should invite them down, but on our terms. A small delegation, limited to a specific landing area, with clear protocols about behavior and interaction, and we present ourselves as equals," Kaylin added firmly. "Not as a species in need of rescue, but as people interested in establishing mutually beneficial relations." Valen smiled, the first truly relaxed expression Derek had seen from her in months. "This is exactly why we needed you both. The perspective to see beyond our immediate crisis to the larger possibilities." Over the following days, the preparations for first contact consumed the entire settlement. The communication array was completed ahead of schedule, its bioluminescent components creating a beacon visible from orbit. Careful protocols were established for the meeting, with Derek and Kaylin serving as primary liaisons, supported by a carefully chosen team of Veix representatives. The landing took place in the same clearing where Derek had crashed months earlier, now cleared and prepared as a proper landing pad. 3 humans emerged from the survey ship's shuttle: Captain Sarah Chen, Dr. James Morrison, and xenobiologist Dr. Lisa Park. Derek had specifically requested a diverse team including a scientist who specialized in first contact protocols. "Derek, Voss?" Captain Chen asked, extending her hand in the traditional human greeting. "We've been looking for you for quite some time." "It's good to see other humans again," Derek replied, shaking her hand while noting how strange the gesture felt after months of Veix customs. "But I should tell you right away, I'm not exactly in need of rescue anymore." Dr. Park's eyes widened as she took in the assembled Veix delegation, her trained gaze cataloging their obvious intelligence and sophisticated technology. "My God," she whispered. "They're magnificent." The formal introductions proceeded smoothly, with Kaylin serving as cultural interpreter, and Derek explaining the complex situation that had developed since his crash. The human delegates were professional and respectful, though Derek could see their amazement at discovering not just intelligent life but a crisis that humans might help resolve. "So you're saying," Captain Chen summarized, "that you've not only survived here but integrated into their society, and that you're expecting a child together?" "The first human Veix hybrid," Derek confirmed, his arm around Kaylin's waist. "But hopefully not the last." Dr. Morrison leaned forward intently. "The genetic implications are staggering. If cross-species reproduction is possible, it suggests far more biological compatibility than we've ever encountered. Which brings us to why we wanted to meet with you," Kaylin interjected smoothly. "We're not looking for charity or rescue. We're proposing a partnership, exchange programs, shared research, mutual assistance in exploring this region of space." The negotiations that followed extended over several days, with both sides working to establish frameworks for cooperation that respected the autonomy and dignity of both species. Derek found himself serving as cultural bridge, helping humans understand Veix perspectives while ensuring his adopted people weren't overwhelmed by human eagerness to help. The agreement they finally reached was groundbreaking. A small human research station would be established on the planet, staffed by volunteers interested in cross-cultural exchange and joint research projects. In return, selected Veix would be invited to visit human worlds, sharing their biotechnology and unique perspectives on sustainable living. Most importantly, reproductive cooperation would be entirely voluntary, based on individual choice rather than species-wide programs. Humans and Veix who chose to form relationships would do so freely, with full support from both governments, but no pressure or expectations beyond those they placed on themselves. As the human delegation prepared to return to their ship with news of the historic agreement, Captain Chen pulled Derek aside for a private conversation. "You know," she said quietly, "there will be a lot of humans who won't understand your choice. Staying here, bonding with an alien, having hybrid children, some will see it as betrayal. Derek looked across the clearing to where Kaylin was speaking with Dr. Park, her pregnancy obvious and beautiful in the afternoon light. And some will see it as the most important thing any human has ever done, he replied. Building bridges, instead of walls, choosing love over fear. Captain Chen smiled. I think you're right. And for what it's worth, I think you've found something special here. That evening, as the human shuttle departed for orbit, Derek and Kaylin stood together on their favorite platform high in the canopy. The communication array glowed softly above them, now serving as a permanent link between worlds rather than a desperate cry for help. So, Kaylin said, settling beside him with the careful movements of advancing pregnancy, we're no longer alone in the universe. No, Derek agreed, but we're still together. And that's what matters most. In the months that followed, Ethros transformed from a hidden refuge into a bustling center of interspecies cooperation. The first human researchers arrived to work alongside Veix scientists on projects ranging from sustainable biotechnology to advanced space exploration techniques. Cultural exchange programs brought young people from both species together, creating friendships and sometimes romances that further strengthened the bonds between worlds. Derek and Kaylin's daughter Arya was born on a day when both suns were visible in the sky, an event the Veix considered supremely auspicious. She was beautiful in ways that transcended species boundaries, with her father's curiosity and her mother's grace, amber eyes that held depths of intelligence, and skin that carried subtle patterns of bioluminescence inherited from her Veix heritage. More importantly, Arya was healthy, intelligent, and represented proof that the future didn't have to be about the survival of separate species, but about the evolution of something entirely new and wonderful. As Derek held his daughter for the first time, looking into eyes that reflected both human and Veix heritage, he realized that his crash landing on this impossible world hadn't been an accident. It had been the first step in a journey that would reshape the galaxy. Love, it turned out, really was the foundation everything else had to be built on. And from that foundation, two species were building a future among the stars that neither could have imagined alone. The jungle city of Ethros hummed with new life, new possibilities, and the sound of children's laughter, human and Veix, and something beautifully, impossibly both. Derek Voss had crash-landed on an alien world looking for rescue. Instead, he had found home, love, and a future that stretched across the stars. Sometimes he reflected as he watched Arya sleep in her bioluminescent crib. Being lost was just another way of being found, and sometimes what a dying species needed wasn't salvation. It was renewal, partnership, and the courage to love beyond the boundaries of biology and fear. In the Crystal City among the jungle canopy, two species were learning that the future belonged not to the survivors, but to those brave enough to build something new together.